All right. So, experimenting a little bit here. Thanks for everyone's patience. We'll see if we can keep pushing on, and I'll keep an eye to make sure if the stream does collapse, post a message in the chat so I'll be able to fix that. We might do these as short segments. So again, the next question I want to raise is this idea of how do audiences make meaning from media? So as we just saw in the previous discussion, there was the idea that the Fine Brothers show us how the React video has become very popular. Similarly, the idea that from media industry's perspective, there's an interest in making sure your media works. So here we have the very funny image of, I think it's a local Pakistani council who had forgotten to turn off the cat filter while they were live streaming a press conference on Facebook. And it led to a disastrous, or maybe spectacularly good, engagement. So from the media maker's perspective, we can see one of the key things is all media makers need to understand how the media they make address, engage, communicate with, and impact audiences. And sometimes they do that knowingly, and sometimes they do it unknowingly. As in here, by forgetting to turn the cat filter off, their engagement went through the roof with the type of viral circulation that they achieved. In a more everyday sense, this question of how the media is connected and engaged has received a lot of attention, of course, from funding organizations. So the CEO of Screen Australia, Graeme, back in 2016, talked about the fact that when I talk about new ways to adapt to audience behavior, I'm talking about the need to find your audience and work out how to engage them. This is no longer how will a broadcaster promote a show for one specific slot. You need to think of your potential audience. Are they watching the public broadcasters or the FTA's Foxtel, YouTube, Google, Netflix, Curiosity Stream, an art gallery or museum, or the local country hall? Who is going to the cinema, the festivals, the regular sessions, and what are they seeing? Or what about the second windows and long tail? So again, this question of, who is the audience? What are they doing? Where are they going? If we ask that question that Graeme asks with Spongebob Squarepants, I think it leads us to some interesting points. So who is the audience for Spongebob Squarepants? Who watches SpongeBob? Kids. Yeah, kids certainly watch it. How do you explain something like this article then? Here we have BuzzFeed 18 adult SpongeBob jokes that completely went over your head as a kid. So the idea here that there's more than one audience for every text. SpongeBob clearly had a lot of adult jokes for a non-kid audience. Simpsons is a great example of this as well. Equally, it has similar articles talking about the fact that, here's all these adult jokes you may have missed in The Simpsons when you were a kid. And the idea being here that of course, it's in the best interest of any media creator to make sure they can maximize their audience, to ensure they have the possible revenue streams coming from various spaces. So it's not surprising that industry has always been interested in multiple audiences. There's a long history, of course, of doing this deliberately, right? So what we're looking at here are examples where texts, and here we can see a whole selection of others, Gravity Falls, Horrible Histories, Adventure Time, Doctor Who, all deliberately have looked at including more than one audience. And often it's, in this sense, young audience, adolescent audience, and adults, because the parents are going to be sitting down and watching it as well, and you don't want them to just switch off and get bored and dislike your content. So it's a very difficult balancing act. Here are some examples of good ones. I love thinking a little bit out of the box with trying to explain phenomena like where audiences for Teletubbies start to exist. Teletubbies are a very kids-oriented show, of course, young kids. If you look at TV tropes, though, and the entries around shows like Teletubbies, you quickly become aware that there's a college, teenage audience for this material as well. The kind of Teletubbies space, the Night in the Garden space, has a reputation as being used as a hungover cure, a kind of joke text to watch. So again, neither Teletubbies or In the Night Garden are aimed at adults or people that are using it to get over a hangover or watching it while they're drunk or influenced. But nevertheless, audiences are engaging in that way. They're shifting and making sense of the content, as Fiske would say, by being audiences, by audiencing. They're appropriating it for their own interests. Iron Chef as well is a really interesting example. Iron Chef, if you've not seen it, in certainly Iron Chef Japan, very over-the-top, flamboyant, kind of campy cooking show, how to cook dishes, but it's always kind of very preposterously big. Now, of course, when it was initially launched through the Food Network, it was aimed at 40-year-old housewives, because it's a cooking show, right? And they completely missed their audience, which started to emerge around teens, 20-somethings, 30-somethings, that were just loving the hilarity of its over-the-topness, right? And the advertising only slowly addressed that, right? It was aimed at housewives, but then it shifted to this other audience. So again, not a chosen audience, but a different one. For me, the most spectacular example of what audiencing is and why it's interesting to look at audiences is an example like My Little Pony and the kind of questions which emerged around, explaining its fan base, particularly its adult male fan base, right? So again, doing a web search on bronies, we can see here images which you wouldn't normally associate as My Little Pony fans, or who is the audience for My Little Pony? You'd say, well, young girls. So the explanation, trying to explain the brony phenomena, why older guys are engaged and enjoy and participate and produce actively My Little Pony, that question is again the heart of why audiences matter, why audiences are strange, and why audiences do things that are unexpected as well. The fact that a kind of very non-masculine, non-boy-based show has become adopted as a different type of aesthetic, of meaning around audience engagement. Interestingly, within the brony audience, it's not all happiness. 3 weeks ago, there was a fascinating article on My Little Pony fans are ready to admit they have a Nazi problem. There's a hardcore right-wing community within My Little Pony. Fascinating point. I'd always thought the appeal of My Little Pony for a brony audience was the friendship as magic narrative, that it was all about togetherness, it was all about an inherently good kind of liberal narrative. So I'm really scratching my head as to what the audience, the Nazi audience for My Little Pony is about. So again, that question, I think, though, does propel us into these questions of the difficulty of engaging and explaining who the audience are. Even locally within other industries, so for example, here at the University of Tasmania in the media school, we were visited by Ray Martin last year, well-known reporter, and he was talking, these questions of knowing who your audience are key for even journalists. So, 2 quotes he had: if you forget your audience, you've got a dead program, and write so someone wants to read it. So always have an idea of who your audience is. Then it's fascinating when you find these surplus audiences, these audiences which are kind of beyond the DNA of your initial program. Now, within this, of course, knowing who your audience are, what's interesting is audiences are also consumers, right? That is, audiences are a commodity manufactured by the media industries whose primary goal is to sell audiences attention to advertisers. So here we have a nice little magazine cover. So what I like about this image is that it even shows you from right back at the dawn of television, right? So here we have a very antiquated picture of television, a guy watching it on his kind of smoking chair with his pipe, right? So this, what is this, the 1930s or something, 1940s, 50s? The 1950s, the idea that even at that early stage, as you can see from the image, he's being sold something, right? So this is, as you can see on that picture, he's being sold a jacket to buy, right? And the important point there is one that Dallas Smythe suggested back in 1981, that there's this thing called the audience commodity, that media produces audiences and then sell them to advertisers. Right, so audiences and the engagement with media has always been part of an economic interest, an idea of the commodity that an audience has. So Dallas Smythe's other really famous quote is, "There's no such thing as a free lunch." That is, if you're watching free-to-air television, you're thinking, fantastic, I'm getting free content. Is it free, though? Right? Obviously, that advertising, as we all know, is what is driving this apparently free content. That you, as an audience member watching the television show and the ads in between it, are the commodity which the television producers are selling to the advertisers, right? So they can say X number of hundreds or thousands of people watch this show, therefore we charge you X rate for advertising during this show because this type of target audience is there. And within that commodity logic, it does show us why it's so important to know who your audience is. If you have an enormous male fandom for My Little Pony, you do want to know that you're addressing it appropriately. So for the rest of the semester, and again, in the space of the Twitch channel we're in at the moment, experimenting with going into fieldwork, we're going to be looking at some of three things, right? So on completion of this studies, you'll be able to describe key debates about the effect of media content on audiences and engage with these debates in an informal and critical manner, right? Possibly even outside of a classroom. We'll see what other locations we can get into. Discuss the use, sharing, reimagining, and creation of media material by audiences. So we've seen some examples of that with strange and unusual audiences for texts that pop up. Analyze media texts with awareness of the way audiences are addressed, positioned, and constructed. All right, so we're going very broad around some key themes. And critically within the unit, one of the things to do is to please make sure you access the Milo site every week. So one of the key parts of that, if I reappear, is this idea that the heartbeat, the location of this unit is entirely going to be online, and we're going to try to have as much fun as we can with that by looking around at doing some interesting things, like obviously playing in real digital spaces like this one in Twitch, relocating into places maybe like this background of the TARDIS. But it might be helpful also to just quickly go through some of the unit. This is the Milo site, and what I quickly wanted to do was just quickly, if I disappear so you can see what I'm talking about, we can quickly see here the key aspects of the unit. Hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look through it so far. So really the announcements are where most of the key text is going to be shown. If you hit content, from tomorrow morning we'll be going into the first real topic, which is images and science. So if I give you a bit of a teaser now, much like all your other studies, we'll have all the main content here. All right, so the key learning content, there'll be a couple of clips to watch. So here's one that'll just break down what the key concepts are for what's called semiotics, right? That's kind of unpacking the meaning of text. Here's the reading. So the reading to have a read for tomorrow is Media Texts by Jason Bainbridge. A great video clip talking about color psychology in cinema, why particular colors are used to convey certain emotions in cinema. And then the work to do. So the thing to really get ready for this week is if you're unable to attend classes and you're distance-based, so your engagement will be via the discussion board. So if we click on that, you can see it takes you to week 2 discussions, which is a little clunky, but it does work well enough. A forum that you can post your responses to and other students can engage with. The key thing about that is, if we skip over to the unit outline, is that as you would see on the unit outline, if I scroll down quickly, There's the participation engagement that you'll need to be doing, which is worth 10%. And for that, it does involve you, if we go right down, basically either in coming to one of the web conference classes, which we'll be doing during tute times, or posting a question to the discussion forum. All right, so this week we'll have classes running on Tuesday, and the engagement with that is just here through the web conferencing, and you can participate in the class that will be accessed there. So that's mainly where we'll be doing a lot of our work, on the discussion forums, right there, or on the scheduled tutorial classes. If you are a distance student and you would like to come along to one of the classes, I do really encourage you to do that. I'd be absolutely happy and thrilled to see everyone and anyone that has access to it to come along. You can easily get access to that, as I've just shown you on those clips. Classes are Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and I'll post those details up on the website. And hopefully we'll have quite an interesting and engaging, stimulating discussion. I'll take you through some further assessment points. I guess they're the main questions. So as you can see, if we scroll up again, 4 assignments in the unit. I will disappear so you can see that a little more easily. 4 assessments. So there's the short exercise, which is coming soon on the 3rd of August, the essay, and the audience research project right at the end of the semester. But I'll take you through that more during classes this week. This was just a short kind of primer, and also to see what it would be like to jump into a real location in the real world of kind of internet engagement like this, to experiment. So look, thanks so much for joining this experiment. We'll see if we can get some other locations organized to do some further streams. We might hold others in the Milo site. And again, all this will be recorded and posted up. For those next week, I look forward to the discussion comments, as well as I look forward to the first class on Tuesday to go over some key concepts and ideas. Any questions, I look forward to hearing about them. And I hope you found engaging with this content on something like Twitch an interesting experiment. Thanks very much.